Hello friends, this is Angelica. Thanks so much for joining me today. I am super excited for this video. Tim Holtz has just revealed the final color in his Distress line, and we are going to be playing with it. Now, scrapbook.com graciously sent me the full product line of scorched timber. So I am going to be doing some swatches, some techniques, and then we're going to put together a couple cards. So I'm going to show the full bundle here really quickly. There are 8 products in the bundle. You have distress paint. There are reinkers for the full-size ink pads. There's a distress ink pad and a distress oxide ink pad. You're also going to get sprays. You have the distress spray stain and the distress oxide spray. And I'm going to be working with both of those in this video. And there's also an embossing glaze. So it's embossing powder, but when you melt it, it is transparent. So you will be able to see what's under it, but it still has that really pretty brown tone to it. There's also new distress crayon sets and a mini ink pad set that has scorched timber in them. The other colors are also the newer distress ink colors that have been released this past year. Now there's also a new tiny blending tool. I will be using that in the video, and it does have the foam applicators and then also a new watercolor pencil. For my projects, I'm going to need to use some pretty strong paper. So scrapbook.com did send me this mixed media, all these paper pads. There are black and white in 2 different sizes. I'm going to be using the white paper throughout this video. And the first thing that I need to do is I need to swatch these colors. I want to know what they look like. Each product is going to have a little bit of a different tone to them. So I'm going to start with the distress ink, and I'm going to use that tiny ink blender to blend the ink out. I'm starting with distress ink, and I started with a really heavy hand and then blended it out lightly just to see what it fades out to, and then I just closed it up. So it's one solid color. So that's the distress ink on the mixed media paper, and this paper was so lovely to work with. If you like Bristol smooth paper, this has that same exact slick surface to it, and it's just dreamy to blend ink on. So this is the Distress Oxide ink, and you can see that there is a difference in color. The Distress ink is bolder and darker. The Oxide has more of a chalky look to it. I love Oxide inks. I use them quite often in my videos, so I was super excited to get busy with that Oxide ink. Now the next swatch is the paint, and again I'm just using the tiny tool to blend that the paint out just to see what the tone of that paint is. And now I'm going to do the sprays. So I'm going to mask the rest of the paper so I don't get the spray on my other swatches. And I'm going to bring out my spray box, and this is just an old box. This is what I like to spray in. I spray all of my adhesives and whatnot in it. So I'm going to start with the Distress Oxide spray. I do wish I was a little bit more heavy-handed with the spray, but I did get some on the paper, so I'm going to let that dry and then move the masking tape. This is mint tape. So I'm going to cover up the Oxide spray, and I'll spray the other side with just the Distress spray. So you can see the difference between these sprays. And I gotta tell you, this is my first time working with Distress sprays. I do have the Oxide rainbow, but I've never thought about buying the Distress sprays, and I was so impressed with the distress spray that I know I will be investing some money into other colors because I had so much fun playing with this color. So now I know what these products look like on white paper. Now I want to do some ink blending with scorched timber and other colors. So I'm going to use scorched timber as my darkest color, and then I have picked out different colors to blend with it, but I am keeping each swatch in the same color family. I'm not doing like going from orange to blue. I'm just sticking with pinks and oranges and yellows on each swatch. So for this one, I picked Victorian Velvet and Aged Mahogany to blend with Scorched Timber, and I really, really like how these colors turned out. And Scorched timber is such a beautiful color to lay under an oxide or over an oxide. I love to put a lot of shading on die cuts that I ink with Distress Oxides. And I have found, I've been working with scorched timber during this video and after this video, and I have reached for this pad more to do my shading than any ink that I have used before. It is so lovely to add dimension to your paper. So here are all the swatches that I have done. I will leave a link down in the description to my blog, I will have all of the colors I used for each swatch. So you can find all the colors over there if you're interested. But like I said, I just did a rainbow of swatches and just loved how all of them turned out. So I was super excited to get really busy with this ink. Now, the one thing that really caught me off guard was the distress spray. So that's what I'm going to start with first. I am going to put my mixed media paper through an embossing folder before I spray it. And this is the awesome Tim Holtz 3D texture embossing folder. This is Brickwork. And I did spray the paper first before, I lightly sprayed it just to kind of loosen up the fibers in the paper. Ran it through my die cut machine. And now I have this really cool white brick wall that I need to get super dirty. So I'm going to pull out my spray box again. And I am going to spray it with the Distress spray. I'm not going to be too heavy-handed with the Distress spray because this is the first time that I am playing with it. So I just did a few sprays and then followed up with a couple sprays of water and tilted the paper back and forth just to get the ink to move around. And once I was happy with how it looked, I still wanted a little bit of the white paper to be poking through. So that's why I was really light-handed with the spray. Once I liked the way that it looked, I'm going to pull out my heat tool and dry the panel really quick and decide if I need to spray it again or not. Once I had the panel dry, I did decide I was going to finish off the brick wall with some Distress ink. So I'm going to bring out the large ink pad, and I started with a large foam applicator to add the ink, though I wasn't trying to add ink all over the paper. I just wanted to add spots of ink here and there to give the paper some different tones. This applicator I found to be just a little too big to do what I wanted, so I brought out the little tiny tool to be able to put really heavy ink in smaller areas. I've already sprayed a second panel with the Distress Oxide spray, and I want to do the same to this brick wall like I did with the Distress ink. So I'm going to add a little bit of Distress Oxide ink throughout the panel, and the Oxide ink kind of blended right into the Oxide spray. So I did pull out Ground Espresso Distress Oxide ink just for a little bit of a darker tone to emphasize some of the brick on the paper. Now the embossing folder, it is awesome, and it really brings a lot of texture to your panels. So some of these bricks stand up pretty tall, and that helps catch the ink. So you're going to get all of these different tones to your panel. I made I made a lot of brick walls, and I'll show you a few once I'm done with this last panel. And I did spray this panel with Distress Oxide spray, the Scorched Timber, but instead of using the Scorched Timber Distress Oxide to emphasize the brick, I used the regular Distress ink over the Oxide spray. I loved how it turned out. It's very dramatic. To finish the panels, I did blend some Distress microglaze over the top, and this makes the paper waterproof, smudge proof, it locks in the color, and it gives a beautiful satin finish. So I thought that was the perfect touch for these panels, and like I said, I made quite a few brick walls. I was really addicted to this, which is why I'm like super excited to get some more Distress sprays so I can do more projects like this. I'm going to make one more background before jumping into the cards, and this time I'm going to be using the Distress paint. I've never used distress paint before, so I wasn't sure what to do with it. The bottle said it's acrylic paint, and acrylic paint is usually what I use on my DIY projects, not on paper crafts. So I decided, you know, I'm going to experiment more with this paint later, but for now I just wanted to make a simple background with the paint. So I just grabbed a mug from my kitchen and used the bottom to stamp the paint onto the mixed media paper. I also watered the paint down and did a lot of splatter on the panel too. I'm just going to continue going back and forth between splattering and stamping the coffee rings on the panel until I am happy with how it looks. And then we're going to move on to making some cards. Now, I had a lot of fun putting these cards together, and I was able to use a die set that's been sitting right next to my desk. I've been waiting for time to be able to use it, and I thought this was going to be the perfect opportunity to use it. So it's called Fall Treats. It's from scrapbook.com, and I am going to make a coffee themed card using the dies from this set. Now, I've already done all of my die cutting off screen, and I die cut Neenah Solar White 110 pound cardstock. This is the paper that I love to do my ink blending on with die cuts. And I also love to use sponge daubers to apply the ink onto the paper. The to-go cup, I wanted it to be pink, so I picked aged mahogany and worn lipstick to color the cup with. And I kept the aged mahogany close to the edges just to give a little bit of shading and different tones to the cup. Now, it would have been a perfect opportunity for me to use the scorched timber on top of the aged mahogany to make it really rich, to make that color really rich, because scorched timber, I found out when I was doing the second mug in this video, how beautifully scorched timber sits on top of other inks. And that really made me happy since I do so much ink blending on my die cuts. I'm finishing up the to-go cup. I did add a little bit of lost shadow on the white lid just to break the white up a little bit. And now I'm going to move on to the large mug. And I did start with aged patina first and used a little bit of peacock feathers on the edges. I thought that that was going to be good enough to add some shading, but it did really nothing. So that's when I decided, oh, you know what? Let's try out scorched timber, see what it does. Oh my goodness, match made in heaven. I just loved how this turned out. Scorched timber has a green tone to it since it's such a cool toned brown. You know, in my watercolor palette, this is, I would call this umber. I think I mentioned that before. So it just sits beautifully on top of peacock feathers. And I did want it to be a little bit richer, so not only did I blend on the Distress Oxide scorched timber, but I also did a little bit of the Distress ink also, since it is a darker color. Once I was done with the mug, I pulled out Lost Shadow again, just brushed a little bit of that on the whipped cream that I'm going to put on top of the mug. And to finish the coffee cup, the to-go cup, and the mug, I'm going to add some hearts to them. I'm going to pull two dies from Concord and Knife's Pretty Sweet die set. It's the coordinating set that goes with the Pretty Sweet stamp set. So I added some red ink to the hearts before I glued them onto the mugs. And since these die cuts were pretty tiny, I just attached them to mint tape first before adding the ink, so the little hearts weren't moving all over my desk when I was trying to ink them with the sponge dauber. Now I'm going to move on to getting the sentiments ready, and again I'll be inking the love with scorched timber, and then I just ink the edges of the shadow die cut with scorched timber also. This die set I got last month in December. When you're shopping at scrapbook.com, you always want to stop by their coupon page and see if they have any freebies for the day. They always do. And this just happened to be one of the freebies on a day that I turned in my order. So I highly recommend just checking out what they're offering for the day. If there's a sales code, just a quick way to add a couple extra things to your cart that doesn't cost you anything. This is the Love You Hugs die set, and I'm going to use the U from that die set to finish off my sentiment. And you see all that time and effort I put into my coffee background, I ended up not even using it because I thought the coffee mugs looked great on the brick wall. So complete change of plans. That always happens at my desk. I sit down with one idea and end up with something completely different. So once I was happy with this arrangement, I attached everything to the card base, and I do want to make one last card because I wanted to use that coffee background that I made. So I die cut a heart. This is Stacking Hearts from Honeybee Stamps. I used one of the hearts from that set to die cut this heart. I inked it with Candied Apple Distress Oxide ink, and now I'm going to ink the edges with Scorched Timber. The sentiment that I'm going to be using is also from Hugs Love You die set, and I already have put that together. I did use Scorched Timber for the shadow to put behind the words. And I also decided to put the panel, the coffee panel, on Nina Desert Storm card base instead of a white card base, just to break up the white. And now all I have to do is add the heart and the sentiment. I am using my 0 center ruler to make sure I have that heart centered perfectly on the card base, and then I'll add the sentiment to the heart with thin foam squares. And that's going to finish this card. So this ends the introduction to Scorched Timber, the new Distress ink, which is available now. I will leave links to all the products that I use down in my description box. They will be affiliate links, so I do get a small commission, and that's at no cost to you. It just really helps out my channel, and I truly appreciate your support. I want to thank you so much for hanging out with me. I know this was a longer video, so thank you for sticking with me to the end. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe if you'd like to see more. I'm going to be back shortly with another video, so I'll see you then. Take care, friends.